excited again. My name is Liz Wessel. I'm the co-founder and CEO at WayUp. Welcome, everyone. And Errol, thank you so much for joining. How are you?
Hey, Liz, great to be here.
Great.
Hi, everyone.
Awesome. So before we get started, I have a ton of questions for you. And I know the people watching also, I'm sure, will have a ton of questions. But let me just introduce you because you have quite the background and quite the role. So for anyone watching who's not familiar, Errol is the Global Vice Chair of Consulting for EY, which means he runs their 70,000 person global consulting practice. I thought I had a lot of people on my team. That's nothing compared to you. Prior to EY, he was a partner at IBM. And before that, he held various roles at PwC. So basically, he has now climbed the ranks at some of the world's largest and most influential companies, and now is running literally one of the most influential consulting practices in the entire world. So not a big deal, you know. He's based in London. He has his economics degree from the University of Nottingham. So you're welcome to everyone for bringing someone on with such a beautiful accent. And finally, I do want to mention that Errol is a member of the Executive Leadership Council, which is an organization committed to increasing the number of C-suite Black executives on corporate boards and in global enterprises, which we will certainly talk about. So with that, it is an honor to be interviewing Errol today. Thank you so much again for joining.
Okay, thank you. I should have you do my intros more frequently. I should, maybe we can record that and I could use that in other events. Thank you very much.
Deal. Well, great. So let's get started with, you know, in your title, Global Vice Chair of Consulting, a lot of people watching this might be wondering, what do consultants even do? So I want to get into your role too, but like, what is consulting for anyone watching who doesn't really know?
Well, I think really great question, because as I go around and people ask what I do and I say I'm a consultant and think, does that mean you're a doctor? What is that? And so, no, I'm a management consultant. Well, what does that mean? So in essence, we help organizations, companies, governments to resolve their business issues. It could be issues in terms of how they want to grow revenue, how they want to manage their costs, how they want to reduce the risks within their business, and change in some way, shape, or form. And the reason organizations require consultants is that no matter who they have employed within their organization, they generally need specialists to come in who've done it, seen it, been there with others to learn and understand how to make that change happen. Because most of the organizations that you will know and interact with yourselves as customers will be very used to doing what they do on a standard basis. But in order to change, putting in new systems, putting in new ways of working, putting new processes in place require quite specialist skills. And that's what consultants do. So we, in many ways, we are like doctors. We help get companies into a better place and get them change, what we would say transform, to change for the better, increase revenue, as I say, reduce costs, all of these things. But that's a critical function of what we do at a high level.
Awesome. And what about you in particular? I mean, you oversee a team of 70,000 people. So if you drew almost like a pie chart of your role, how do you spend your time?
Yeah, so mine is then very different to what most of those 70,000 people would do. So I'd say I mainly do 5 things. So one is around client and market interaction. So working with clients and unfortunately, it's less on a day-to-day basis now, and it's more in an advisory capacity, helping some of our senior clients in terms of how they think about some of the changes they're undertaking. Secondly is around business performance and planning of the EY consulting business. So that's a key aspect of what I do. Thirdly is around strategy development. So a key aspect of my role is not just thinking about what we are doing today and tomorrow, but what are we looking like in 3 and 5 years time from now, and making sure we are responding to the trends in the market and preparing those 70,000 people you described for what is coming next. Fourthly is around people management. So managing what for me is largely the partner group that we have, and making sure they are therefore managing the people that we have across our business. And the fifth is a bunch of things that we need to do to enable our business to perform more effectively. And to go to your pie chart, it very much varies based on the time of year.
Okay.
Because at the moment, we've just finished our year end, which is at the end of June, and we're very focused on business performance and closing out what that looks like. A lot of people management activities, strategy development happens in very intense bursts. So it varies. It's kind of fast changing. There's never a dull moment.
Awesome. Awesome. And if we rewind back a bit, I'd have to imagine that as a child or as a college student, you didn't always necessarily know to dream of one day being the head of an entire global consulting practice, only assuming that because most people don't know what consulting is in college or before. So tell me a little bit about Errol in college. What were you like? I mentioned you studied economics. Like, what did you want to be when you grew up? Tell me about college, Errol.
Well, maybe just to start before, and I guess the choice I made around economics. So my mother and father were both, I guess you describe, from a working class background. So in that respect, neither of them worked in the professions before, but what they wanted of their two sons was that they did a professional or had a professional background. So my brother became a lawyer, and I studied and became an accountant. So part of my choice to do economics was that I did accounting as part of that degree, which actually bypassed the first level of professional accounting exams. I had to get what is the equivalent of the CPA qualification in the US. So that was in many ways the choice. And what I would probably say, with all due respect to my parents, is they probably encouraged me to do that quite strongly. So it was maybe 70% their choice, 30% mine. The great thing about doing that at the time and making that as a choice is it gives you, or gave me, very much a platform to do a number of different things and have a bunch of choices. I think when you're, I certainly found when I was 18, 19, 20, I had no real idea what I wanted to do. And I had no real notion what it meant to become an accountant or an auditor, effectively, as I became at the outset. And so it's only when you start experiencing some of those things and also seeing what other people do in other jobs, other professions, that you get a better sense of what will work for you personally. So I really had no idea, and it was very much my parents that pushed me into the initial choice that I made. But I thank them for it, because it was a really great start to my career.
Awesome. And can you talk a little bit about, you've worked at PwC, as I mentioned, IBM, EY. Tell me a little bit about the difference between working in consulting at an accounting firm or, a company that's known for its accounting practice versus at a company known for just management consulting, like a McKinsey or Bain and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a really great question, because I think, as I look at our business, we today as EY, we compete with that full spectrum. So you've got what are known as the big four accounting firms, so Deloitte, PwC, KPMG, and EY. You've got the strategy houses, McKinsey, BCG, and Bain and the like. And then similarly, you have what are known as more of the system integration players or the technology firms, so IBM, Accenture, Capgemini, and increasingly organizations like Cognizant, TCS, and Wipro and others. So a really broad spectrum of different players out there. As you mentioned, I worked for 6 years at IBM, who are, as many of you will well know, a very large technology organization, but have a significant services and consulting business as part of what they do. But the other clear distinction between what they do and the likes of an EY, for instance, is that they're publicly listed. And one of the big differences that drives, and this is true with Accenture and some of these others that are listed on the SEC, is that they have quarterly reporting requirements. They have to meet the expectations of shareholders, which drives a cadence to their business that looks and feels very differently to what it's like in a partnership. So in the Big Four environment, we're all private companies. We are private partnerships. So the likes of myself, I'm a partner in the firm. We have approximately 12,000 partners in the firm globally across all of the business lines that we have, and that we are effectively the shareholders in the business. So it's, that's a very different model in terms of what we do. What it means in terms of the types of work you do is it's actually probably not that different. It's shades of gray. So a lot of us are then still making change happen for clients in the way I described earlier. It's just that strategy houses tend to work at the start of the process with clients as they're thinking about, do we really have a problem? What are we trying to fix? What are some of the options? What could that look like? You'll get an organization like ours who will help the business then go through, well, what could be some of the solutions that you could put in place to solve those issues, those problems, growing the revenue, fixing your supply chains, looking and putting in new financial systems, connecting with your customers in a much better way, helping their experience. And then typically you'll have the systems integrators who will implement technology solutions to a level of detail. Now, all of the firms I've described would say that they do elements of all of those things, but that's a little bit of where they double down and focus. So hopefully that gives you a sense of
I just learned a lot. Yeah, I just learned a lot. I actually didn't know that. So that was really, really helpful. Thank you. And from a personal perspective, just you personally, what made you want to go into consulting versus in the accounting practice, since you mentioned you took the equivalent of the CPA?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, my first 3 years were focused on becoming professionally qualified from an accounting perspective. And without meaning any disrespect to my colleagues in auditing, like a number of people post-qualification, I was keen to do something else. And actually, the reason I got into consulting is that one of my audit clients were doing a project to implement a new financial system. And they said, well, you know all about our finances and what we need to fix and address. Could you help us with this project? And so I did that, and I did it for about 9 months, and it was the best project engagement that I'd been involved in, and certainly better than any audits that I'd been involved in. And so I just continued doing it, and then, one thing led to another, and 27 years later, I have a track record of doing that in a number of different places. So I think, so in a way, it was serendipity that got me to doing consulting. What I'd say, what kept me and has kept me, and I still love being part of this business, is, consulting is all about challenge and variety and complexity and learning new things on a very consistent basis. So the kind of variety of challenges that you meet with different clients in different industries, in different parts of their business, and in many cases in different countries, and how you make sure and you start from a perspective that you know nothing about that organization, and then after 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, you know an awful lot about that organization and you've moved them forward. It's a hugely rewarding experience, and it's something that's always given me energy, and I've loved doing it for the time that I've been. So auditing was a great foundation, but consulting has been fantastic for me.
Awesome. Really helpful. I am curious, you've risen through the ranks to lead this organization. Presumably you have some all-stars and rock stars on your team as well. What do you think is, helped you do so well to actually take this role that you're in now at the very top?
Well, there's so many things. As I say, I've been a long time in this business, and I've had some fantastic opportunities. We focused a lot on the start of my career, but if you kind of pull it forward all through those times, there's been a number of interventions and points where I've been very fortunate. I've had the right opportunities at the right time. I'd say I've also taken some risks at times. So I I was asked relatively early in my career, given what I said, where I started from in audit, I was asked to run a systems development team. And I had no idea about technology at the time at all, but I was asked to run a team that was writing code, that was building software solutions for a client. And I learned a huge amount just leading that team, helping them to get to the right outcomes. But in many ways, they were teaching me. I was learning and developing as part of that. So moving in the early part of my career, spent a lot of time working in oil and gas in some very big institutions or companies that you would all have heard of. But then I was asked to move into financial services. So you kind of go from large scale, what was downstream oil and gas, into investment banking, and to a certain extent in life assurance. It was completely different. So the opportunity to have that breadth of experience, I think, has given me a foundation of skills. I also worked a lot internationally. So I've worked in North America, in the US quite extensively. I've worked across a number of countries in Europe and the Middle East as well. And I think all of that experience over a passage of time builds up your ability to do the type of role that I do now. So, as you mentioned, globally accountable for the business that we have, a significant what is close to $11 billion business on a global basis. But fundamentally, it's not all about me. We have a bunch of very senior leaders across the business who have equally, if not more important roles in executing and making sure that we deliver successfully. And my job in many ways is to just help and enable them as much as possible to do that. So, it's a combination of good fortune, taking some risks, getting some fantastic experience. And I guess the final thing I'd say, which is true throughout anybody's career, is a lot to do with sponsorship and mentoring. And having the right people that help and intervene at the right moments in your career to help you, to guide you, to move you in a different direction, but also to position you appropriately for the right opportunities when they're coming around. So that's how I'd summarize that.
That was really helpful. And just to double click on outside of the experience, which makes perfect sense. I love that you said, the risk, you had an appetite for risk. When you look at yourself or other peers around you who've really risen through the ranks, any other personality qualities that you would say often you see that everyone has in common who's kind of getting promoted a lot or really becoming a leader at EY?
Yeah, so I think so 2, 3, 4 really critical things. You could argue some of these are quite generic across a number of different professions, but for sure within consulting and within EY in particular. So we're a people business. I mean, you talked about our 70,000 people. We achieve success with clients through teaming and collaborating, both as an EY team, but also collaborating and working very closely with the clients that we work with. So if you have those skills in order to be able to work in that way, to team and collaborate, to cooperate, to have each other's backs, all of those things, but also then critically important, building relationships with people that you may only know for 6 months. So, the first time you meet them, you get together, you have a shared goal and objective, and actually building a collective vision and an accountability to achieve that is really important. So that teaming, collaboration, networking is really important. Clients are fundamentally important. So, in our business, our success is defined by what we achieve with clients and how the outcomes that we've managed to achieve, and therefore the track record that we get as a consequence. And so being super focused on achieving the best outcomes for your clients, no matter what you do. So corporately, that's really important, but individually, that's really important as well. So from the minute you start, at the point where you have zero experience, and all you have is your intellect, your personality, all of those things. It's what can you do to over exceed the expectations of the clients that you have. And as long as you maintain that through your career, you'll generally do well. And then the last is relationships. So we are very much a relationship-based business. So both externally with clients, and this is knowing senior people in positions in organizations, but also internally in knowing people within the marketplace that you can bring into your organization as prospective employees, or in my case, as partners. And when you start working, you never think about this. But what you need to remember that is in 20 years' time from now, all of those people you meet when you start work will be chief executives or CFOs or CIOs or CMOs or partners in other organizations. And retaining those relationships will be critical to your success going forward. So those are some of the attributes. I mean, the last I'd say in terms of especially, which has become more and more important through my career, is now it's all about EQ. So what's got you to where you'll have got to today, I'm sure, is that you're all smart, you're all incredibly clever in the topics, subjects that you're studying at university. It's really those skills of intuition, sensing, working with others, making sure that you can bring teams along the journey with you that are critically important. And we'll talk maybe about this as we go forward, but that's becoming even more important as the workplace becomes more diverse, as there are more issues that we now need to openly deal with and be very transparent as well as very authentic in how we show up to respond to those. Those attributes are critically important now, whereas I think 30 years ago when I started working, whilst they arguably should have been important, were certainly seen less so.
Awesome. So helpful. And I agree, EQ all the way. It just comes up all the time with our clients as something that they're looking for in candidates, let alone, as you said, in as managers look to promote. So we have so many questions coming in. So I'm going to ask one more, and then anyone watching, you are welcome to ask more questions. Just press Q&A. But after this one, I'll switch it over to the audience. So it's not every day that I get to meet an executive at one of the largest businesses in the world who is also Black. And I know that you obviously are in the group, the Executive Leadership Council, where you're actually working on how do we advocate for more C-suite Black executives at large companies? So I'm curious, or at companies in general. So I'm curious, is there anything you think that helped you in particular most with getting to where you are today? And also, why do you think it is that we don't yet see more Black executives in C-suite at some of the largest companies in the world?
Well, I mean, this is really important question, and there are so many ways I could take this. Just to keep it relatively brief, I'm of course immensely proud in terms of where I've got to, but it's also quite lonely, and it's quite interesting. But one of the real benefits of the Executive Leadership Council is developing a network of other individuals who ordinarily you don't see, you don't have line of sight to, but that you can have conversations about shared experiences and some of the challenges that we've all faced in terms of progression in our careers. I mean, what I'd say, so why is it we don't have the representation, if you like, or it's not where it should be? I think it's in very ways two simple things. One is the corporate culture of the organizations in which we all sit, and the second is the individuals themselves. And so what I mean by that, so the corporate culture, and as I say, historically I joined, I started my career in auditing 30 years ago. There were no Black partners here in the UK. I think there were probably very few of them even in the US at the time. So there was no notion of that was an aspiration, that was something that I should think about going forward. The great news today is that that's different, but not as different as it should be. So I think people have more of those individuals now to get to. But I think what we've got is a legacy of people who have not seen role models that they could say, I'd really like to become that type of individual. And so what that does to the individual then is, and this I had very much myself when I started my career, is a complete lack of confidence in the environment, in my ability to succeed within the workplace, in all kinds of situations. So I would always, or you could say 19 times out of 20, I would walk into meetings and I'd be the only Black person in the room. And so you, to an extent, you get used to that, but you're also used to the dynamics that that causes at the time. And one of the fundamental things of success in the business like consulting for sure, and I'm sure it's true of most, if you like, in becoming a senior leader, is confidence. And so I think getting to that point where you get beyond that, I think is a very important personal journey to go on to kind of in many ways change your mental attitude, get to a point of confidence in those situations, and almost not to see yourself as being inferior. This wonderful term that didn't exist 30 years ago of imposter syndrome. So getting beyond that sense that you don't have a right to be there, because clearly you do. But then, so that's on the personal side, but then on the corporate side, there's still a lot of work to do. It's improved and we've made progress. And, one of the things that I've been a sponsor of within EY in the last year, primarily as a response to obviously with the Black Lives Matter movement that crystallized starting in May last year with the George Floyd death, that we've on a global basis then driven out a whole program of how do people from ethnic minorities, whatever their background, obviously Blacks, Hispanics, Asians have obviously suffered a lot because of some of the discrimination around the pandemic. How do we start addressing some of those issues in corporate culture and how people are viewed in that context to make sure we're solving and resolving some of those things? So I think it's a lot to do with the individual and how they look and perceive things, but then it's also a lot to do with the corporate culture and how we need to continue to change that.
Fantastic. So helpful and incredibly insightful. So thank you so much. I have so many more questions for you, but we're going to go to the audience because we're getting some amazing questions. So first up, we're going to welcome on stage Patricia Burry. Patricia is from New York City, and she has a question about the global aspect of your role. So let's see if we can get Patricia up on stage.
Hello, folks. Thank you for having me over here, and thank you, Errol, for your time. I would like to ask you, actually, I will be starting with EY in Washington, D.C. In the fall. I have other opportunities, but my major is accounting and my minor is business communication, finances, and economics. Is a lot of going on over there. And my question actually for you, it is, since I am originally from Poland and I graduate completely different major, marketing and management in Poland, in Krakow. And I would love to maybe try working in Europe. How will be maybe my transition with the company going to Europe, and will be, if I will be in DC, I will be working, actually my career will be starting with auditing. How will be maybe, what will be the transfer from US working in accounting in Europe, and what will be the pros and cons?
And Errol, maybe when you're answering, just for those who don't work at EY, just talking in general, if you don't mind, about the transition from working in the US to international, to Europe, vice versa.
Yeah, so I will answer it generically, Liz, but allow me to say to Patricia what a fantastic choice she's made of employer in the future. So I look forward to welcoming you as part of the firm. I think, look, you're about to go on a journey with the organization that you're joining that will give you a a wealth of opportunities. It will be relatively straightforward in the grand scheme of things to be able to transfer, not necessarily on day one or on day 30 internationally, but there are a number of different ways that you can do it. There are particular, if you're going into auditing, there are audit clients that you could work on that would give you an opportunity to travel and work in multiple countries, including Europe and potentially Poland. You could, after working for a period of time, apply for a secondment to work on that, which is oftentimes is good if you can do that around a particular client situation again. And I did a secondment early in my career from a two-year basis working outside of the UK. So that's something that a number of organizations will offer generally. So I think that the key is always to look for the opportunities that will allow you to do that, but also make it very clear to the people that in the organization that you're joining and working most closely with, that that's what you're interested in doing in the medium to longer term, so that as those opportunities pop up, they will be thinking about you in that context. And then the only other thing I'd just say is to reach out to colleagues and others that you could connect with in the Polish firm in terms of what might be opportunities with accounts that in Poland that have operations in the US that you could connect with and doing things like that. So the only thing I'd just say, as I say, your view today may change when you join, when you see the other opportunities that say, actually, no, I'd really like doing that. So stay open-minded in terms of how you think about that, because the opportunities could be significant for you. And it's important that you make an appropriate choice, an informed choice after you've joined.
Awesome. We are going to welcome next onto stage. Thank you so much for your question, Patricia. Garima Chadnani. And Garima, you can come on and also turn on your video and audio, since you mentioned you're happy to do that. So while she is joining, I do want to say, I love how you talked about your international experience. I worked for a year in India after college, and I felt it just really helped me, translate. You always work at most companies with people from around the globe, and it just helps you with empathy and understanding. So I love that point and that last question, Patricia. Thank you. So Garima, welcome, and feel free to ask your questions.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Liz, for this opportunity, and hello, Errol. My name is Garima. I'm a current MS Quant Finance student from University at Buffalo. I started my journey with my undergrad in majoring in finance and marketing, and later on I started working with S&P Global in their reporting business on making reports for Capital IQ platform. Later on I started my master's in United States in quant fintech, and now I'm working with a small community bank on making their automating reporting products and other fintech products. So I have been in a journey where I have tried various things. Like I have been on consulting projects, school projects, as well as on core finance projects. So my question here is that, first of all, consulting firms do hire a lot from Ivy Leagues. In that case, how should I put my step inside? Because it's a lot competitive world here. So
Garima, just to make sure I heard you correctly, did you say we hire a lot from Ivy Leagues?
Yes. So
yeah, I mean, that is certainly true and the case. And one of the benefits of being part of an organization like ours is you are working with a lot of like-minded, very bright intellectual and academic types, if you like, very high achievers in that sense. But I think it's also true to say that we do go across a number of different universities and colleges in terms of bringing people in, even to the extent now that we, in certain parts of our business, take people who are not even graduates. So I think we're doing more and more of that. And as I mentioned earlier, that EQ is becoming so important, and some of the actual skills that you talked about that, in many ways STEM capabilities are becoming much more critical to our business going forward as well. There's much more openness to get people of those types of backgrounds into organizations like ours as well. So I'd encourage you to, I don't obviously know what you've been doing at detail level there, but to pursue that and use the opportunities to get into firm, whether it's EY or others of a similar nature in consulting, that I think you'll find the opportunities are there.
Okay, and I just have one follow-up question.
You could go for it, but we'll just have to be quick because we've got like 100 questions here. But go for it. And by the way, I can confirm we help EY on the recruitment. They're a partner of ours, and I am so impressed. They recruit you guys, Errol. You recruit from like every school I've ever heard of. It's amazing. So I definitely would second what he said. Sorry, Garima, go for it.
Yes. So how is the core consulting of EY different from that of McKinsey, BCG, and Bain?
Well, so as I mentioned earlier, I think, and I'm conscious within this environment not to get into competitive dialogue about the respective organizations, but I think McKinsey, Bain, and BCG are typically focused on doing strategy work.
Okay.
And in many ways exclusively strategy work, which puts them in a particular part of the market. We as an organization also do strategy work, but the way I would describe it, we do strategy work, we'll do business transformation work, we'll do technology delivery work, we do managed services as well. So there's much broader spectrum of what we do as a business. That's how I would, in a nutshell, characterize the difference.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Garima. Thank you so much. All right, next up, we are going to welcome Alana Wilson. I think she'll be asking her question on audio. So Alana, you can come on up on stage and I'll introduce you. Alana attends St. Peter's University, working towards attaining their BSc in accounting. So Alana, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you so much. And thank you also, Mr. Gardner, for your insight and presentation. So you know that no two personalities are alike. And I know that you mentioned relationships are important, EQ is important in such a setting. So how would you go about handling conflict if and when it arises amongst your team members?
Oh, great question. And thank you, Alana. You don't need to call me Mr. Gardner. And I like the accent there. I think I recognize it. So, I mean, what I'd say, conflict, you're right, is in many ways an important part of the creative process in an industry like ours. So to a certain extent, you want to encourage that. And by conflict, I mean disagreement. I mean having separate points of view and having people that are ready and prepared to articulate that. So you want that creative process to be encouraged. But as and when it goes too far and in the wrong way, I think there are different ways to intervene in those scenarios. And I think, we are all getting much better corporately and certainly from an EY perspective in terms of handling where and how we see inappropriate behavior when we see things bordering on bullying, for instance, or people asserting through seniority that they have a right to shut other people down or whatever other means that may happen. So I think, from our culture and our perspective, those things are completely unacceptable and outside of our values, so that we don't tend to see those things other than by exception, and then we'll deal with them appropriately. But as I say, there's an element of encouraging that, and I know you're probably thinking more in the negative sense, but encouraging that creativity and making sure that people are feeling that they have the opportunity to voice different points of view. But what's really important in our world, especially as we're facing out to clients, is that we come to a view and we all collectively stick with it. So that's really important as well in terms of what we do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alana, for asking. Next up, we're going to welcome on stage Dion Neighbors. Dion, you can come on stage and turn your video and audio on. Dion recently finished their master's degree in IO Psych and is interning with the Colorado Department of Transportation. Very cool. So Dion, you are welcome on stage with your video and audio.
I'm very impressed at how you manage all this complexity, Liz. It's fantastic.
It's all my team behind the stage. They're amazing. All right, we'll give it maybe, how about we'll go to Dion next, just in case, and I can ask someone's question who, and while you're working to my team behind the scenes, you are welcome to put Dion on stage and I'll ask the next question that came in from someone who doesn't want to ask on camera, which is totally understandable. We have a question from Maria Garcia, who's a data consultant at Wells Fargo. And Maria wants to know, what are some of the biggest challenges you face as a consultant in terms of like expectations from your clients or ambiguity with a project?
Well, that's a great question. We have lots of challenges, especially from clients, of course, not Wells Fargo, but clients, banking clients in that industry who have very high expectations of us, and also situations of ambiguity as well. So, yeah, at the end of the day, that is, you know, I mentioned earlier to you, Liz, that's in many ways the essence of what organizations are looking for from consultants. So a degree of specialism and bringing to the table skills of having seen and done something before, and in many ways moving from ambiguity to clarity. So helping an organization transition through that journey. And whatever that ambiguity is, it's we don't understand the scope, we don't understand what our problem is, we don't understand what the root cause of what that problem is, whatever those things are, doing the analysis around that, understanding that and working it through with various stakeholders. That is the kind of processes that we, in many ways, are responsible and involved in. On the expectations, it's very difficult because I mentioned that it's critically important that we exceed expectations. And in some industries, that's much easier to do than others. But I think it's really important that that you are continuing to drive that. And in financial services, that's particularly challenging, and in banking in particular. So, you know, it's in many ways keeping the dialogue open with your client to check in to say what their expectations are and to document and demonstrate how you are delivering against those and making sure on a repeatable basis that you're showing that that is the case. And not kind of waiting 6 months to say, well, you said you wanted us to do this and we did it, and then you find there's a mismatch. So right. It's keeping the dialogue going on a continuous basis to make sure that you do so.
Fantastic. That's actually very helpful. And I feel like that applies to more than just consulting, but that makes a lot of sense. It applies to life. All right, next up, we are going to welcome on stage, you can turn your video and audio on, Lemiha Similovic. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. So you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, sorry, it's actually Lamia, but a lot of people usually get it wrong, so it's okay. It's a totally easy name to butcher. I am actually a recent graduate from UIC, University of Illinois, Chicago. I finished in finance. So lately I've been trying to, well, not lately, but in general, this past year since graduating in December 2020, I have tried to enter into the consulting world, but however, it has been a little bit tricky, just because I don't have a lot of experience in consulting or any internship experience for that matter. So, but I do have a work background. I did work in cargo industry and freight airlines, and so I'm very like familiar with like how a lot of functions work and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering, like, what is some advice you can give to someone who maybe like has like limited experience, but they're trying to branch off into the consulting world or their career potentially, and what is something that can maybe like help me?
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Lamia. Great question. And I think the first thing I'd just encourage you to continue to be persistent. You know, as you well know, we've been through a very difficult period, the last 18 months or so, with the pandemic, which has caused all kinds of issues, not just in consulting, but generally in terms of capacity management, hiring people, bringing people on board, and indeed even hiring people, but they never actually meet anybody in person. So quite necessarily, certainly in EY, and I think this is true across the industry, we've been hiring less than we typically would be. What I would encourage you with is I think you'll find over the next year that will very much change, and that we'll be hiring a lot more. And the types of skills at the high level you described them, I think could be quite relevant. So I continue to be persistent, continue to stay close to people that you may know who are in this industry, who can help you make connections. You know, I mentioned earlier to Liz that the importance of the network, if you like. So if you can find your way to getting to know some people who work close to where you live, or in some of the firms that you might be interested in, that could help you to get a way in to navigate through some of that, and they can sponsor you through that. That could help. But I just encourage you to continue to persist, and don't take what may have happened in the last year as an indication of what might happen in the next year to come.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys are, it seems from the outside, you guys are growing like crazy. So it definitely, and for everyone watching, and while I'm saying this, Raj Mehta, you are welcome on stage, and we'll turn your video and audio on. But for everyone watching, there are a lot of roles live at EY right now, and so definitely check them out. We've been sharing the link in the chat, so please feel free to check those out. But next up, we're going to have Raj Mehta. Raj is a rising sophomore at MIT, currently working as a summer business analyst intern at a nonprofit. So Raj, you are welcome to turn your video and audio on. Thanks for joining.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Errol, for coming on to speak. It's been great hearing a bit about your experience and background. So just a bit about myself. I'm currently a rising sophomore at MIT, and I'm working at a nonprofit firm specializing in consulting with small businesses around Massachusetts. And I was wondering if there are any experiences or programs from your undergraduate or postgraduate career that really helped to shape your career aspirations, and how you're able to find such programs.
Well, so back, you mean when I was at the stage that you're at?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you have the beauty of your age to me, but the world was very different when I was your age. But I did do an internship at one of what are the big four now, which really helped me in terms of some of those things. But I did actually work in a number of different places. I worked in local government doing some financial accounting work. And I worked in some other aspects doing some very manual labor types of scenarios. So I think all of those things are and can be important. I mean, it sounds like what you're doing is some really good foundations as to help you into the consulting world. And then from an EY perspective, we do a lot of work with entrepreneurs and small businesses and indeed not-for-profits as well. That is a key part of what we do in terms of our business model. So, and not just exclusive to us, I think many others will as well. So I'd encourage you to understand or read about some of those programs that others are doing, and see how you can connect and hook into those. I mean, I think you're doing, it sounds like what you're doing is a really good starting point. It's really just getting the hook and connection into be it in the Massachusetts area and some of the firms specifically in that area who sponsor similar programs, be it that you want to focus on not-for-profit or you want to focus in the commercial world, taking the experience that you have and making it work for you going forward.
Fantastic. Great question, Raj. Thank you so much and good luck with the rest of your internship. All right, the last question, and I'm so sorry to everyone because you all are submitting such amazing questions. So please don't hate me forever because I know these are amazing questions. But the last one is going to be from Vincent. Vincent is actually an EY audit intern in the San Jose office, but Vincent's also an economics and international business student at the University of California, San Diego. So Vincent, you are closing us off with the final question.
Wow, I feel so lucky to be here. Well, hello, Liz. Hello.
We can't hear you. So sorry about that. In the very worst case, I see your question, so I can always read it, but for some reason we can't hear you. You're not on mute, so I'm not sure what's going on. I'm sorry, Vincent. Let me read your question though, because I thought it was a fantastic one, and you can stay on video for it. But to pull up your question, so what advice would you give to current student leaders and future corporate leaders who want to build more diverse and inclusive corporate cultures? Great question.
Oh, yeah. Well, fantastic question. I'm not sure how much longer do we have? Look,
About 2 minutes. I'm sorry.
Well, I think one of the fundamental things is you need to listen to diverse groups. So your starting point is not to do it top down. It's actually to do it in an inclusive way. So I think to start with, who are the communities that you have with, if you operate in a city, if you operate in a particular country, what are the dynamics? In our firm, of course, we operate in, 150 plus countries. So we have to consider all of the dynamics in a number of different countries to do that. But I think that's really important that you then tune in to listen to the experiences, the lived experiences of the people that are within there. I think reverse mentoring is really important because, you have old people like me who, I've got my own diversity experience to a certain extent, but we all look at things through particular prisms of our own experience. And just because I'm a Black man who's made it through various barriers doesn't mean that I understand diversity in its widest and inclusion in its widest sense. So I think giving all leaders the opportunity to hear from different groups and what they're experiencing is really important. And we found that with, I mentioned this global social equity program that we're doing has been critical. Just watching leaders hear the stories of individuals and what they are experiencing in their day-to-day lives within our firm, and also working with clients, and also what they experience when they're not in the work environment has been key. And then obviously it comes down to action. And it's really important then that it's got the right sponsorship at the leadership level, that you've got somebody of the appropriate authority within the organization who is seen visibly to be supporting that initiative in order for everybody else in the leadership points in the organization to see it as being important. But there's probably another 15 things I could have said, but I'll pause there. Otherwise, I'm sure I'm going to get be told to shut up. So
no. But it's such a great question from Vincent and such a great. It's a really inspiring answer, and I think to that ending point that in the comment you just made, like there's no necessarily one right bullet that will a silver bullet. So fantastic. Yeah. Well, I can tell from the list of dozens and dozens of questions that have yet to be answered that this was a really helpful and inspiring session, not just for me, but I think for all of the attendees. So thank you so much for doing this. Before we sign off, is there like a Twitter handle that you tweet on, or a LinkedIn, or that's something that people should follow you on, or should they just follow EY?
No, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not a big fan, I have to say, of social media for all kinds of reasons, but I am on LinkedIn, so you can find me. You've got my name. You can see me. And very welcome to ping me coming from this if there were some burning questions that I didn't manage to answer. And I post there. I send all kinds of information out there, and similarly through EY.com as well. There's a bunch of things that I do from that perspective. So feel free. And thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great fun to do it. It's been great to hear your questions. And the things, it always helps me to hear what you are thinking about. You are the future of our business, it's really important. Believe it or not, the average age of our business is 27 globally, which you might not find. So as you can imagine, a lot of young people work for our organization. It's really important that we understand you. So thank you for the opportunity of speaking to you all.
Thank you so much. And I don't know if you can see all the comments coming in, that everyone is so inspired. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And to everyone watching, we had shared the link of the EY roles. So please check out WayUp to check out more of the EY jobs, because it's an amazing place to work, as you've heard yourself from Errol. So thank you all. And Errol, thanks again. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. All the best.